In a wild delta where mercy has no voice, a lioness gives birth to 3 cubs. 2 are golden, strong, and welcomed by the world. The third is black as night, and from the moment he cries, everything changes. As hunger tightens and the pride turns cold, the mother is forced to make a choice no heart is meant to survive, to walk away from the cub calling her name. But in the wild, some stories refuse to end in loss. Years later, when the mother collapses at the edge of survival, it is the cub she left behind who stands between her and death. This is not a story about miracles. It is a story about instinct, regret, and the kind of loyalty that waits until the very end. Dawn came slow over the Okavango Delta, turning the tall reeds to gold and laying a thin mist across the water like a sheet pulled gently over a sleeping world. Out here, mornings didn't begin with noise. They began with breath, with the soft cough of distant birds, with the quiet shiver of grass as something large moved through it. Daniel Brooks had been awake since the first hint of light. He lay on his stomach inside the canvas hide, careful not to shift his weight too loudly, his binoculars already warmed by his hands. Beside him, Dr. Nora Hale checked her watch, then looked up again, eyes narrowing as if she could will the lioness into view. "She's close," Nora murmured, barely moving her lips. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The air itself felt tight, as if the land was holding its breath. A shape emerged from the reeds, low and deliberate. The lioness moved with the heavy grace of an animal that knew every stalk and shadow in this place. Her coat was dusty, her belly slack with the weight of late pregnancy. She paused once, ears flicking toward the water, then slipped into a small rise of grass, tucked between 2 stands of papyrus. Daniel caught a glimpse of her face when she turned. There was a worn steadiness there, the look of a mother who had done this before and understood the cost. "Lena," Daniel whispered, naming her in his head the way he always did, even though the rules said not to make it personal. Nora's pencil hovered over her notebook. "She's choosing a decent spot," she said. "Dry enough, hidden enough, if she's lucky." Luck was a word that didn't belong in the bush, but people used it anyway, as if nature might respond to politeness. Minutes stretched, the light climbed, and then, so quietly Daniel almost missed it, Lena's body tightened. Her head dipped. A long, low exhale left her ribs. She settled deeper into the grass, and the world narrowed to that patch of earth. The first cub arrived with a wet, urgent wriggle, its tiny mouth opening soundlessly before the cry came. Lena licked it clean with quick strokes, pushing it toward her belly as if she could tuck it back inside if she needed to. The second came soon after, smaller, but strong enough to squirm out of Lena's reach before she gathered it in. Daniel watched, jaw clenched without realizing it. Birth was never gentle, even when it was quiet. Then Lena's shoulders tensed again. She lifted her head, ears angled forward as if listening for something that wasn't there. The third cub slid into the world in a slow, struggling movement, and for a heartbeat, everything seemed normal. It was only when Lena turned and began to lick that Daniel saw it. The cub wasn't the sandy gold of its siblings. It was dark, not a little darker, not shadowed by wet fur. Dark in a way that made the eyes refuse to accept it at first. Black as river mud, black as burned wood. A small, trembling piece of night dropped into the morning. Nora's breath caught. She didn't write. She just stared. Daniel lowered his binoculars and blinked, then raised them again, as if the shape might correct itself. It didn't. "That's—" Nora began, then stopped. The words sounded too big for the moment. Lena froze mid-lick. Her tongue hung a fraction of a second longer in the air. Then she resumed, slower now, more careful, like she was studying her own child by touch. The cub tried to lift its head. It failed. A thin, broken sound came out of it, more plea than cry. Daniel felt something twist inside his chest. The smallest, most helpless sound in the world had a way of making even grown men forget rules. Lena nudged the black cub toward her belly, but the two golden cubs had already found the warmth and latched on, pushing and kneading as if the milk belonged to them alone. The dark cub pressed forward, mouth searching, then slipped and rolled onto its side. It cried again, weak and hoarse. Lena's ears flattened. She shifted, blocking the other cubs for a moment, making space. The black cub found her and latched, but its suckling was thin, unsteady. It didn't have the strength the others had. Daniel glanced past Lena, scanning the reeds. A movement there made his stomach tighten. Shapes. Lionesses. They came in silent, one by one, melting out of grass and mist. This was Lena's pride, and they didn't approach like aunties coming to celebrate. They approached like judges. At the front was Marla, the older lioness who carried herself as if the land owed her a path. Her muzzle was scarred, her eyes pale and hard. She paused at the edge of the birthing spot, taking in Lena's body, the two golden cubs, and then the third. Marla's tail flicked once. Daniel could feel Nora's tension beside him. "It happens," she whispered, almost to herself. "Rare, but it happens. Melanism? A genetic roll of the dice." Daniel didn't look away. Does the pride know that? Nora's mouth tightened. The pride doesn't care why. They care what it costs. Marla stepped closer. Another lioness, younger and sleeker, moved to her side. Daniel had seen that one before, quick to take offense, quicker to act. Nora had once called her the spark in dry grass. "Kira," Daniel murmured. Kira's nose lifted. She sniffed the air, then fixed her gaze on the dark cub. The cub's cries had quieted, but its body still trembled as it clung to Lena. Lena watched them all, head low, eyes moving between faces. She didn't snarl, she didn't beg. She simply held her ground, one paw resting near the black cub as if that small contact could anchor it to the earth. Marla gave a low, rough sound in her throat, not quite a growl, not quite a warning. The other lionesses shifted, restless. Two golden cubs mewled softly, blind and content. The black cub tried to reposition, slipped again, and cried. Kira took one step forward. Lena's head snapped up, her lips pulled back, showing teeth. Kira didn't stop. She moved with a calm that was worse than anger, and before Lena could rise fully, Kira leaned in and seized the black cub by the scruff. The cub let out a thin scream that sliced through the morning. For a second, everything was still, like even the birds had gone silent to listen. Then Lena surged. She rose in a flash of muscle and fur, slamming her shoulder into Kira with a force that sent them both sideways into the grass. The black cub tumbled free, rolling helplessly, crying again. Lena planted herself over it, chest heaving, eyes blazing at the circle of lionesses now forming around her. Marla's ears tipped forward. Her stare didn't waver. Daniel felt his hands tighten around the binoculars until the rubber creaked. Nora didn't speak. Her pencil finally touched paper, but the tip shook. Out in the open, Lena stood over the cub that didn't match the world's expectations, and for the first time that morning, the delta didn't feel quiet at all. It felt like a decision was being made, one that would echo long after the sun climbed higher. Chucked. The tension around Lena did not break that morning. It simply settled, heavy and watchful, like heat before a storm. Marla did not challenge Lena again. She didn't need to. After a long moment she turned away, her broad back a clear signal that the discussion was not finished, only postponed. One by one, the other lionesses followed, melting back into the reeds. Kira was the last to leave. She paused, glanced once more at the black cub beneath Lena's chest, and flicked her tail with a sharp, irritated snap before disappearing. Lena stayed where she was long after they were gone. Only when the sun had fully cleared the horizon did she lower herself again, drawing her cubs close. The black one cried less now, exhausted more than comforted, its small body pressed against warmth it did not quite trust. From the hide, Daniel finally let out the breath he had been holding. "That could have gone worse," he said quietly. Nora didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Lena. "It still might." Over the next few days, the pride did what prides always did. They moved, slowly at first, then with purpose, shifting their resting places as the grass thinned and the water pulled back. Lena followed, keeping to the edges, her steps measured, her head always slightly lowered. The black cub struggled. It lagged behind its siblings, its legs weaker, its movements less sure. When Lena lay down, the two golden cubs found her immediately. The dark one took longer, nosing blindly, crying until Lena nudged it into place. Even then, it fed in short bursts, stopping often as if the effort itself hurt. Daniel noticed everything. He always did. He wrote in his log at night the words careful and neutral, the way they were supposed to be. Third cub. Unusual coloration, slower development, no intervention, observation only. But he added a name anyway, penciled lightly in the margin where no one else would see it. Ash. The name fit in a way that made him uncomfortable. On the 5th day, the pride hunted. Daniel and Nora followed at a distance, using the wind and the tall grass to stay hidden. Hunger sharpened everything. The lionesses fanned out, their bodies low, their movements synchronized by instinct, older than memory. Lena left the cubs hidden in a shallow dip, grass pulled loosely over them. She hesitated before walking away, looking down at Ash longer than the others. Ash whimpered as her warmth disappeared, but Lena forced herself to turn. The hunt unfolded fast. A small group of antelope grazed near the water's edge. The lionesses closed in, silent, invisible. Daniel leaned forward, pulse quickening. Even after years of watching, the moment before the strike always pulled him in. Then it went wrong. Ash crawled. No one saw it at first. Not Daniel, not Nora, not even Lena, who was already moving, muscles coiled to spring. The black cub wriggled out from the grass, drawn by instinct, by hunger, by the sound of its mother's breath. In the golden light, the dark shape moved like a living signal flare. One antelope lifted its head. Another followed. The herd exploded into motion. The lionesses lunged anyway, but it was too late. Dust filled the air. Hooves thundered. Within seconds, the prey was gone. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Marla stood still, chest heaving. She turned her head slowly, eyes locking on the dip in the grass where the cubs were hidden. Lena followed her gaze, horror spreading through her posture as she realized what had happened. The lionesses regrouped without a sound. No snarls, no blows, just looks, the kind that did not forget. Lena returned to the cubs cautiously. The golden ones were pressed together, startled but unharmed. Ash lay slightly apart, breathing fast, its small chest fluttering like a trapped bird. Lena licked it once, hard enough to make it squeak, not in anger, in fear. That night, the pride did not rest together. They spread out, distances between bodies larger than usual. Lena lay with her cubs on the far edge, her back to the others. Ash whimpered in its sleep, and each sound seemed to carry too far in the dark. Daniel watched the shapes through his binoculars, long, after the moon rose. "They'll connect it," he said finally. "Every failed hunt, every risk." Nora nodded. "They already have." On the 7th day, the smell came. Daniel caught it first, a heavy, unfamiliar musk riding the wind from the west. He stiffened, scanning the grass. Nora lowered her binoculars. "Male," she said. "Not from this pride." By afternoon, the signs were everywhere, fresh scrapes, stronger scent marks. The warning was clear even to human eyes. A rival lion was moving in, testing boundaries, looking for weakness. The pride felt it too. Marla called them together at dusk, her low vocalizations drawing the lionesses into a tight cluster. Lena arrived last, her cubs tucked close. Ash struggled to keep up, stumbling more than once. Marla's gaze moved from the horizon to Lena, then down to the cubs. She didn't need to speak. Weakness attracted danger. Noise attracted death. Difference could doom them all. Lena lowered her head. Her body trembled once, just enough that Daniel noticed. That night, Daniel dreamed of the black cub crying in tall grass and woke with the sound still ringing in his ears. When he checked his equipment at dawn, his hands shook slightly. Out in the delta, Lena rose before the others. She nudged her golden cubs awake, urging them forward. Ash lagged behind, blinking, confused. Lena paused. For a moment, she looked back toward the pride, then down at the small, dark body, struggling to follow. The decision pressed in on her from both sides, invisible but absolute. From the hide, Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. Something had shifted. The bush was no longer deciding what would happen to Ash. Lena was. By the 9th day, the delta felt crowded, even when it looked empty. The water had pulled back in thin, shining ribbons, leaving mud flats that held every print like a confession. Daniel could read the story of the night without needing Nora's notes. A herd of impala had passed here. A crocodile had dragged itself up to warm in the reeds. And, just beyond the shallow channel, the heavy, wide tracks of a male lion had cut straight through the territory as if no one had the right to challenge him. Nora crouched beside the marks and pressed her fingers into the edges. "Fresh," she said. "Maybe ours." Daniel scanned the horizon. The grass rippled, but he saw nothing. That was the problem. When a male lion wanted to be seen, he was seen. When he didn't, it meant he was measuring. Back at the pride, Marla had gathered the lionesses again. There was no panic in their faces, only focus. Their bodies were tight with readiness, ears turning constantly toward the wind. Lena approached with her cubs, lagging behind the others as always. The golden cubs bounced and stumbled in the clumsy way of young life. Ash followed last, his smaller body working twice as hard. Each time he fell behind, he let out a thin, complaining cry. Marla's eyes narrowed at the sound. Daniel watched. From his hide, unable to shake the thought that the bush was turning into a courtroom. No shouting, no raised hands, just judgment. That afternoon, hunger pressed in again. The pride tried another hunt, not because they were confident, but because they had to. Daniel watched the lionesses spread out, careful and quiet, moving with the slow patience that made them terrifying. Lena moved with them, but her eyes kept flicking back toward the dip where the cubs were hidden. She was trying to protect and hunt at the same time, and Daniel could see the strain in the way her shoulders held. The lionesses found a young antelope near a patch of open ground. They closed in. For a few seconds, everything aligned. Daniel felt his pulse lift. Then the wind changed. It carried Ash's cry, not loud, not constant, but sharp enough. A small, helpless sound that broke the silence like a snapped twig. The antelope lifted its head. The lionesses froze. The prey bolted, and again the hunt collapsed into dust and failure. This time the lionesses did not even look surprised. They looked furious. When they returned, Marla went straight to Lena. She didn't strike. She didn't roar. She simply stood close enough that Lena had to lift her chin to meet her stare. The message was clear. This cannot continue. Kira circled behind, tail twitching. Her gaze never left Ash. Lena pulled her cubs closer, placing her body between them and the others. Ash pressed against her belly, trembling. His mouth opened, and a small sound escaped him, as if he could sense the heat in the air. Nora, watching beside Daniel, spoke under her breath. "She's being pushed." Daniel didn't move. "How far?" Nora's eyes stayed on Marla. As far as it takes. That evening, Daniel and Nora returned to the small field station at the edge of the reserve. The building was plain and sun-bleached, more function than comfort, but the coffee was hot and the radio worked, which made it feel like civilization. Nora sat at the table, flipping through her notes. Daniel leaned against the doorway, listening to the wind. "You keep looking like you're waiting for something," Nora said. "I am," Daniel replied. "A mistake, a fight, a decision." Nora tapped her pencil against the page. "Nature isn't sentimental, Daniel." He looked at her. "Neither are people. That doesn't stop them from doing things they can't explain." Nora's expression softened just slightly, and then hardened again. "If that male moves in, he'll kill cubs that aren't his. That's not cruelty, it's strategy. The pride knows it. Marla knows it. Lena knows it." She paused. "And a cub that draws attention? That puts everyone in danger." Daniel felt the words land like stones. He hated that they were true. The next morning, the male lion announced himself. It wasn't a sight at first. It was a sound. A deep rolling roar that seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating through the reeds and into Daniel's ribs. Birds exploded from the trees. The pride snapped to attention. Heads lifted, ears pinned forward, bodies tightened. Daniel's skin prickled. The roar was not close enough to be an immediate attack, but it was close enough to be a warning. "I'm here." Marla rose and began moving the pride east, away from the sound and closer to thicker cover. The lionesses followed quickly, not running, but not lingering. Lena gathered her cubs with frantic urgency, nudging the golden ones forward, then turning back for Ash when he stumbled. Ash cried again, frightened now, his voice thin and high. Marla stopped. She turned, and for the first time, she approached Lena with something like finality. The other lionesses formed a loose half-circle. Kira was there, eyes bright. Lena froze, cubs pressed against her legs. Marla stepped closer and lowered her head, sniffing the cubs. She smelled the golden ones first, then the black one. When her nose touched Ash's fur, she lifted her head and stared at Lena. Daniel didn't need translation. He felt it in the stillness, in the way the pride waited, in the way Lena's breath hitched. An ultimatum. Move fast, move quiet, move strong, or don't move at all. Lena's body trembled. She looked down at Ash, then back at Marla. Her eyes were wide, not with fear of Marla, but with the impossible math she was being forced to do. 3 cubs, 1 body, 1 chance. Kira took a step forward, not rushing this time, but certain. Lena's lip curled, and a low growl rolled out of her chest, but it sounded smaller than before. The golden cubs mewled, confused by the tension. Ash pressed closer to Lena's leg, as if trying to disappear into her shadow. Marla held her ground. The male lion roared again, closer this time. Lena flinched, and in that flinch, Daniel saw it. The moment a mother understands that love alone won't keep her children alive. She backed away from Marla, not in surrender, but in retreat. She nudged the 2 golden cubs forward, urging them to move. Then she turned to Ash and nudged him too, harder, as if she could push strength into his bones through sheer force. Ash tried. His legs wobbled. He fell. He cried. The sound sliced through the reeds, and Marla's ears pinned back with irritation. Lena froze over him, panting, eyes darting between Ash and the pride. She lowered her head and licked Ash's face quickly, urgently, as if memorizing him. Then she lifted her head and looked at Marla again. There was no agreement spoken, no deal signed, only a look that said, "I understand what you're demanding." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He gripped the edge of the hide so hard his knuckles went white. Nora whispered, "This is where it turns." Lena nudged Ash to his feet again. He rose shakily. She stood over him, blocking him from the pride's eyes for a heartbeat, like she was buying him one last moment. Then she started moving. Not running, not yet, but moving with the kind of urgency that meant the choice had already been made, even if the world hadn't seen it fully. Behind them, the male lion's roar rolled across the water again, and the delta answered with silence. Only Ash's small, trembling cry followed Lena's steps as the pride disappeared into the grass. Morning came without mercy. The sky was pale and hard, the kind of blue that promised heat, but offered no comfort. Dew clung to the grass in thin silver lines, and every sound carried too far. Daniel knew before he saw anything that this would not be a quiet day. The pride moved early. Marla led them east, away from the sound of the male's roar, and toward thicker cover, where escape might still be possible. The lionesses followed in a tight line, bodies low, pace steady. This was not a casual relocation. It was a retreat. Lena brought up the rear. She urged the two golden cubs forward with soft grunts, nudging them whenever they hesitated. They responded quickly, still trusting, still unaware that anything was wrong. Ash followed last, his small body already tired, his steps uneven on the damp ground. He fell once. Lena turned immediately, lifting him gently by the scruff and setting him back on his feet. Ash cried, a thin, raw sound that scraped against Daniel's nerves. Lena froze, ears swiveling, then nudged him forward again, faster this time. Marla glanced back. It was not anger in her eyes. It was calculation. The pride slowed. The gap between Lena and the others widened, just enough to matter. Ash stumbled again, this time near a stretch of open ground where the grass gave way to mud and reeds. He slipped, his small legs sliding out from under him. He cried louder now, frightened and confused, calling for something he did not understand. He was about to lose. Lena stopped. For a long moment, the world held still. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if waiting to see what she would do. Daniel watched through his binoculars, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He wanted to look away. He couldn't. Lena turned her head slowly toward the pride. They had stopped moving. Marla stood at the front, broad and unmoving. Kira lingered near the back, tail flicking, eyes locked on Ash. The message was clear now, stripped of pretense. Move on. Lena lowered her head and breathed out, a sound that was almost a sigh. She stepped toward Ash, nudging him upright. He wobbled, leaned into her leg, and cried again, louder, desperate. She licked his face once, then again. The golden cubs mewled, sensing the tension, crowding against her other side. Lena nudged them away gently, creating space, as if she needed a moment that belonged only to her and the cub who didn't fit. Ash pressed his head against her chest, his small body shaking. He smelled of milk and mud and fear. He rooted blindly, searching for comfort that could not come. Lena closed her eyes. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had seen lions kill. He had seen cubs die. None of it had prepared him for the stillness of this moment, for the way it felt like time itself had been asked to step aside. Lena opened her eyes and looked back at the pride one last time. Marla didn't move. The male lion roared again in the distance, closer now, his voice rolling across the delta like thunder. The sound carried danger, urgency, inevitability. Lena flinched, and then she made her choice. She nudged the golden cubs forward and began to walk, not fast, not slow, just forward, as if the direction itself mattered more than the speed. The cubs followed, trusting, stumbling, recovering. Ash tried to follow too. He took 3 steps before his legs gave out. He fell into the damp grass and cried, the sound sharp and broken. He dragged himself forward with his front paws, leaving a thin trail in the mud. Lena stopped again. This time she did not turn back fully. She stood with her back half turned, head angled just enough that one eye could see him. Her tail twitched once, twice, She took a step. Ash cried louder. Daniel felt his hands shaking. He whispered without meaning to, "Don't." Lena hesitated, caught between sound and instinct. She turned back fully now, walked to Ash, and stood over him. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought she might pick him up again, might defy everything and try to run with all three. Instead, she lowered her head and pressed her nose to his. The contact was brief, intimate, final. Ash stilled at the touch, his cries softening into small, confused sounds. He leaned into her, memorizing her warmth in the only way he could. Lena pulled back. She looked at him, really looked, as if she were trying to carry the shape of him with her. Then she stepped away. Ash cried out. Lena did not stop. She walked back to her golden cubs, nudged them forward, and followed the pride into the tall grass. The reeds swallowed her shape, then the cubs, until there was nothing left but movement and shadow. Ash lay alone in the open. His cries echoed across the water, thin and unanswered. He struggled to his feet, took a few steps in the direction his mother had gone, then collapsed again. His small chest heaved, his voice cracked. Daniel lowered his binoculars, his vision blurred. Nora stood beside him, silent, her face drawn. She did not write. She did not speak. They both knew what came next. Ash was too small to hide well, too weak to flee. His cries would carry. The delta was full of listeners. Daniel scanned the ground through the grass, his eyes catching on shapes that made his pulse jump. Hyena tracks, fresh, overlapping. A low laugh drifted on the air, distant but unmistakable. Daniel's stomach dropped. Ash cried again, and this time the sound did not fade into the reeds. It answered something, and somewhere beyond the water, something answered back. Daniel was already moving before he fully admitted what he was about to do. Ash's cries carried across the water in short, desperate bursts, each one thinner than the last. Daniel pushed through the grass low and fast, careful with his footing, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the sounds of the delta. He knew the rules as well as anyone out here. No interference, no exceptions. Observe, record, walk away. He broke all three in the span of a breath. Nora grabbed his arm once, hard. "Daniel!" He didn't stop. "If I don't go now," he said, not turning, "there won't be anything left to observe." The hyenas announced themselves with laughter, ugly and close. Daniel caught a glimpse of movement through the reeds, low shapes slipping in and out of sight. They were testing, circling, waiting for the cub to weaken enough to make it easy. Ash lay in a patch of flattened grass, sides heaving, eyes wide and unfocused. He tried to stand when Daniel burst into the open, but his legs folded beneath him. He cried again, a small sound swallowed by the larger ones closing in. Daniel didn't think. He didn't weigh outcomes or imagine reports. He dropped to his knees, scooped Ash up against his chest, and turned back the way he'd come. The weight surprised him. Ash was small, but he was alive, all heat and trembling muscle. His tiny claws caught in Daniel's shirt as he protested, then went slack when Daniel wrapped an arm tighter around him. A hyena lunged from the side, snapping at empty air. Daniel kicked out blindly and ran. By the time he reached the truck, his lungs burned and his hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the keys. Nora was there already, door open, eyes sharp and furious and relieved all at once. "Get in," she snapped. They drove without headlights, tires chewing through dirt and grass, leaving the sound of laughter behind them. Only when the field station lights came into view did Daniel realize he was crying. Silent tears he hadn't felt start. Inside, Nora moved fast. She took Ash from him and laid him on the table, her hands steady now, all emotion pushed aside. Ash wheezed, his breathing shallow and uneven. His gums were pale. His body felt too light. "He's cold," Nora said, dehydrated, exhausted. She glanced at Daniel. "And Lucky?" Daniel leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I know that." Nora didn't answer right away. She warmed fluids, checked Ash's chest, listened to his breathing. Finally, she said, "We'll deal with that after he's stable." Ash survived the night. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden surge of strength. He simply kept breathing. By morning, his eyes focused. His cries softened into weak, questioning sounds. Nora allowed herself a small nod. Daniel slept on the floor beside the table, waking every time Ash moved. When he finally stood, stiff and sore, the weight of what he'd done settled in fully. By midday, the radio crackled to life. They'd been spotted. Tire tracks, human scent in a restricted zone. The message was polite but firm. A review would be conducted, statements taken, permits examined. Nora set the radio down slowly. "They'll come," she said, "and when they do, they'll ask why." Daniel watched Ash lift his head weakly and settle again. "Because he would have died," he said. "That's not an approved reason," Nora replied. 2 days later, the warning came in person. A representative from the reserve stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, eyes moving from the equipment to the table where Ash lay wrapped in blankets. He didn't smile. "This isn't protocol," he said. Daniel met his gaze. "No?" "You interfered with a natural process." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "I stopped a preventable death." The man sighed. "You know how this works? There will be consequences. Suspension, possibly removal." Daniel nodded. "I understand." After the man left, the station felt smaller, quieter. Nora sat down heavily and rubbed her temples. "We can keep him hidden for a while," she said. "But not forever." Daniel looked at Ash, at the steady rise and fall of his chest. "I'm not asking forever." That night, Ash slept without crying. Daniel sat beside him, listening to the wind move through the delta, knowing he had crossed a line he could not uncross. He didn't regret it, not yet. Outside, the bush went on as it always had. Inside, everything had changed. Ash grew, but not the way lion cubs were supposed to. His body filled out quickly once food came regular and warm, his dark coat smoothing into a deep, glossy black that caught the light like polished stone. His legs strengthened, his appetite returned. On paper, the recovery looked clean, successful, a life saved. But Daniel saw the other changes too. Ash startled at sounds that should have meant nothing. A distant roar carried on the wind would make his body stiffen, his ears flatten, his breath hitch. When the hyenas laughed far beyond the fence line, he paced until his paws wore shallow tracks into the dirt. He did not answer calls. He did not practice the small, clumsy charges cubs usually tried on anything that moved. He watched instead. From behind the low barrier of the enclosure, Ash studied the world with wide, quiet eyes. Other animals. Birds lifting suddenly. Daniel crossing the yard with a bucket. He tracked movement the way prey did, not predators. Nora noticed it too. "He didn't learn a pride," she said one evening as they reviewed footage. "No siblings to wrestle, no aunties to correct him, no one to teach him where he belongs." Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched deep into his face. "He belongs here for now." Nora didn't argue. She just nodded, which somehow felt worse. They raised Ash carefully, no hand feeding, no playing. Daniel kept his distance even when it hurt, forcing himself to stand still when Ash pressed against the fence nearest him, head low, eyes searching. He spoke softly, but never lingered. "I'm not. Your pride," he whispered once when he thought no one could hear. "I can't be." Weeks turned into months. Ash grew tall, strong, too strong for the small space they had carved out for him. His muscles moved smoothly under his dark coat now, his stride long and quiet. From a distance, He looked every inch a wild lion. Up close, the differences showed. He didn't know how to assert himself. When other rescued animals called out from nearby enclosures, Ash froze instead of responding. He slept lightly, waking often, his body coiled as if expecting to be chased. Then the video surfaced. It was a short clip, grainy and unremarkable at first glance. Ash standing near the fence. Daniel passing by, carrying supplies. Ash stepping closer, lowering his head until it rested briefly against the wire as Daniel paused on the other side. Someone had filmed it from far away. Someone had shared it. By the next morning, the station's satellite phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails poured in, messages, news requests, donations, opinions, a black lion cub abandoned by his mother, saved by a ranger. The story spread faster than Daniel could follow. People projected themselves onto Ash, onto Daniel, onto Lena, without knowing her name. They argued in absolutes: hero, villain, miracle, mistake. Ash became a symbol before he became a problem. Daniel stood in the doorway of the office as Nora read through a message, her jaw tightening. "They want him moved," she said. "A private facility, more space, more funding." Daniel shook his head. "He's not a showpiece." "They say it's temporary." "They always do." The name attached to the proposal came up again and again. Wyatt Crane. Wealthy, influential, passionate about conservation, according to his website. Nora frowned every time she read it. "He wants access," she said. "Visibility, control." Ash didn't know any of this. He paced the enclosure that afternoon, restless, lifting his head whenever voices rose nearby. When a helicopter passed overhead, he bolted, slamming into the far fence, hard enough to make Daniel's heart jump. Daniel ran to him without thinking, then stopped himself short, forcing his feet to stay planted. Ash turned, eyes wide, breathing fast, searching for something that wasn't there. That night, Daniel sat alone outside the enclosure, far enough back to respect the boundary, close enough to see Ash settle eventually into the grass. "You were never supposed to be here," Daniel said quietly. "And I don't know where to send you." In the distance, the delta breathed. Frogs called. Water shifted. Life continued, indifferent and steady. Ash lifted his head and looked toward the dark horizon. Somewhere out there was a place he had never learned, a pride that did not know his scent, a language he had not been taught. Daniel watched him, a grown cub without a past and a future being decided by people who had never heard his cry in the grass. The choice that would shape the rest of Ash's life was already moving toward them. The decision came on a morning that looked almost kind. The sky was clear, washed pale blue by a light wind that moved through the grass in slow, rolling waves. If Daniel hadn't known what was coming, he might have mistaken the day for an ordinary one, the kind the Delta offered when it wanted to pretend it was gentle. Ash sensed the change before anyone told him. He paced the length of the enclosure, head low, tail flicking in short, sharp movements. Every unfamiliar sound made him stop and listen. When a truck engine started nearby, he froze, muscles tight beneath his dark coat. Daniel stood with Nora near the gate, both of them quiet. "They're ready," Nora said at last. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. "The council approved it. Release is today." Daniel nodded once. He had argued, he had written reports, he had made phone calls that went nowhere. The decision had been shaped by pressure and money and optics long before the final vote. Wyatt Crane was not present, but his influence was. The release site had been chosen far from human eyes, far from known prides, sold as a clean slate, a place where Ash could find himself according to the language of the documents. Daniel didn't believe in clean slates anymore. They moved Ash carefully. A dart, quick and precise. Ash startled, spun once, then slowed, his legs folding as the sedative took hold. Daniel caught his breath as the lion went down, every instinct screaming at him to intervene even now. Ash's chest rose and fell steadily, alive, unaware. They fitted the tracking collar with practiced efficiency, light enough not to burden him, strong enough to last, a compromise between freedom and control. Daniel knelt beside Ash before they loaded him. He didn't touch him. He didn't speak. He simply stayed there, memorizing the shape of him, the way the dark fur caught the sun even now. When Ash was placed in the transport crate, Daniel stepped back. The drive took hours. The land changed slowly, grasses thinning, water retreating, the world opening up into a wide, uncertain expanse. This was not Lena's territory, not Marla's. It was meant to be neutral. It felt empty. They opened the crate just before dusk. The air smelled of dust and dry leaves. Insects buzzed. Somewhere far off, something moved, unseen. Daniel and Nora retreated to the truck and waited. At first, nothing happened. Then the crate shifted. A dark shape moved within it. Ash stepped out slowly, cautiously, as if the ground itself might betray him. He stood still, head low, ears swiveling, reading a language he had never learned. He lifted his head and gaped once, a sound that came out broken, uncertain. It was the first time Daniel had heard Ash try to roar. No answer came. Ash stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked away into the grass without looking back. Daniel watched until the dark swallowed him. The first days were tense but hopeful. The tracking signal moved steadily. Ash explored. He rested. He drank. He survived. Daniel allowed himself to breathe. On the fourth night, a storm rolled in hard and sudden. Rain lashed the delta, turning dust to mud, filling low places with fast, cold water. Thunder cracked close enough to rattle the truck windows. The tracking signal flickered. Then it stopped. Daniel stared at the screen, willing it to refresh, to come back. It didn't. By morning, the rain had passed, leaving the world slick and quiet. Daniel and Nora followed the last known coordinates on foot. They found prints in the mud, big ones, ashes, and others, claw marks, signs of a struggle, but no body, no blood. He could have moved, Nora said carefully. The collar could be damaged. Daniel nodded, but the knot in his chest tightened. He knew how these stories usually ended. That afternoon, a camera trap farther south triggered. Nora pulled the footage up on her tablet, her breath catching. Ash stood in the frame, taller now, broader, his dark coat streaked with mud. Alive. Daniel let out a shaky laugh, relief crashing over him so hard his knees nearly buckled. Then Nora went still. She scrubbed back through the footage, frame by frame. "Look," she said. Ash wasn't alone. In the background, half hidden by grass, were other shapes. Lionesses, moving fast, aggressive. And ahead of them, limping badly, was a familiar tawny shape. Daniel recognized her even before the image sharpened. "Lena," he whispered. Nora nodded slowly. "She's been pushed out, old, injured. They're running her." Daniel's heart began to pound again, harder than before. The past, the present, and the choices he had made were collapsing into a single, terrible line. Ash moved toward the camera in the next frame, then out of view. The footage ended. Daniel stared at the blank screen, understanding settling over him like a weight. Ash had survived long enough to return to the world that had rejected him. And somewhere out there, the mother who had left him was about to pay the price for being weak. Night fell quickly, as it always did in the Delta, like a curtain dropped without warning. Lena ran on instinct alone. Her body was no longer built for speed, her once powerful muscles thinned by age and hunger, her breathing uneven. Each step sent a sharp pain through her shoulder, the old injury flaring with every stride. Behind her, the sounds came closer. Not roars, not challenges. Laughter, hyenas. They didn't rush. They never did. They followed at a distance, patient, confident, knowing time was on their side. Lena veered toward the riverbank, hoping the reeds would give her cover, that the soft ground might confuse the scent. Her paw slipped on wet mud. She stumbled, caught herself, then slipped again. This time she fell hard. The bank gave way beneath her weight, and she slid down into the thick, sucking mud at the edge of the water. She struggled to rise, claws digging in, but the mud pulled back, clinging, dragging her down inch by inch. She roared, the sound raw and broken, more pain than threat. The hyenas answered immediately. They emerged from the grass in a loose circle, eyes bright, heads low, testing. They knew this dance. They had waited for it. Lena turned her head slowly, searching the dark. The pride was gone. The cubs she had raised were gone. The world she had fought to protect had moved on without her. For the first time since the morning she left Ash behind, Lena was truly alone. She roared again, weaker now. The sound carried across the water, then faded. Something else answered. At first it was only movement, a shift in the grass opposite the riverbank. The hyenas hesitated, their laughter stalling as they turned to look. A shape stepped forward, large, solid, black. Ash moved with a steadiness that did not belong to fear. His body filled the space between reeds and water, muscles rolling under his dark coat as he came into the open. He did not rush. He did not roar. He stood. The hyenas bristled, surprised. One darted forward, snapping. Ash lunged, faster than any of them expected, slamming into it with his full weight. The hyena yelped and stumbled back. Ash swung, claws flashing, driving the others away from the bank. He positioned himself between them and Lena, broad shoulders squared, head low, eyes locked on the circling shapes. His growl came deep and steady, the sound of an animal that knew what it was protecting. The hyenas tested once more, then thought better of it. They backed away, laughter fading into the dark as they retreated. Silence returned, broken only by Lena's labored breathing. Ash turned to her. Up close, Lena saw him clearly, the size, the strength, the familiar shape of his face, now stretched and hardened by years she had not seen. She breathed in, her nostrils flaring. The scent hit her like memory. Milk, grass, fear. The small, trembling body she had pressed her nose to one last time. Her ears flattened. A low sound escaped her throat, not a growl, not a roar. Recognition. Ash stepped closer, careful now. He reached her and pressed his head gently against her neck, grounding her, steadying her. Then, bracing his body, he pushed against her shoulder, guiding her weight, helping her find firmer ground. It took time, painful, slow minutes. But together they moved. Lena clawed her way out of the mud as Ash leaned into her, refusing to give ground. When she finally collapsed onto solid earth, Ash stayed beside her, his body a dark wall against the night. Lena lay there, chest heaving. She turned her head and touched her nose to his, the gesture tentative, trembling. Ash did not pull away. Miles away, Daniel and Nora followed the signal as it came back online, faint but steady. Dawn broke as they reached the riverbank. They stopped short, instinct telling them not to go farther. Across the water, 2 lions lay side by side in the early light, one old and scarred, one dark and strong. Their heads were close, bodies angled toward each other, the space between them closed. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He did not lift his camera. He did not speak. They watched as Lena rose slowly, testing her weight. Ash stood with her. When she took a step, he matched it. When she paused, he waited. The world had not given Ash a pride, so he had become one. As the sun climbed higher, Ash looked once toward the distant shapes of the humans, his gaze steady and unreadable. Then he turned back to Lena and walked with her into the reeds, choosing the wild without hesitation. She had left him to save the pride. Years later, he stayed to save her. Shakbab Chafyat. If this story stayed with you, don't rush away just yet. Some stories are meant to be carried, not forgotten. If you believe a bond can survive even abandonment, comment 1. If you believe forgiveness can come without words, comment 0. Your comment helps this story reach someone else who needs it. And if you want to keep watching true stories about loyalty, loss, and quiet courage in the wild, subscribe to this channel. New stories are waiting, and the next one may stay with you even longer. Thank you for watching.